and welcome along to the Woodland Wreath Kit tutorial. This is the kit that is really beautifully natural in tone and style, lots of lovely foliages and finished with a beautiful grey velvet ribbon. It's really sort of a versatile tone of wreath, goes on any front door or on a kitchen table or a dining table for Christmas. So I'm going to show you step by step how to create your wreath, go through all of the foliages and sort of all the elements that we have, and yeah, talk you through step by step how to create it. Okay, so in your wreath kit box you will have your wreath kit ring, which is this sort of copper wreath ring, so that provides the base. You will have your binding wire, you will have some different sort of varieties of pine cones, they'll all be ready wired for you. You will have some lovely sort of lime slices that smell amazing, they will also be wired. You will have your ribbon and your twine and your extra wire for to attach your ribbon to your wreath. I'm going to put these behind me so I don't lose them. Actually, I'll pop them on the side there. They're out the way. And then you will have a big sort of bundle of sphagnum moss that creates the base for your wreath. So that means that your wreath stays fresher for longer. It provides a sort of water source for all of the foliages. And in terms of foliages, we have some spruce, we've got white waxflower, we've got berried myrtle, we have berried viburnum, we have white thistle, eucalyptus, ralphie, berried ivy, and some pistache as well. So lots of different textures, different tones, that's just going to create a really beautiful wreath. Okay, so let's begin. So I want you to take your binding wire and just loosen up a little bit of it, and then you're just going to attach it to your wreath ring by twisting it round a few times. So you're just sort of securing it to your copper wreath base. You're then going to go up and over in a sort of zigzag sort of pattern, and the purpose of this is just to create a base for all of your moss to sit on top of. It doesn't need to be neat, it just needs to create that sort of structure so that the moss doesn't fall through. So you're just going up and over in a zigzag sort of pattern. Now it's crucial to say at this stage that you do not take off your binding wire until right at the end. So you don't snip it off, you just keep it attached to your wreath. Okay, we're now going to add on the sphagnum moss. Now this isn't the most beautiful looking moss, it's not like the mosses that we use in our wreath kits, in our pot kits that you see. This is sort of quite unattractive sphagnum moss because the sole purpose of it is just to create that base and to keep your wreath as fresh for longer. So you won't see any of this when your wreath is on your front door. So don't worry about what it looks like. You know, use all of it, create that really nice dense base. Doesn't matter if the bits are brown, you honestly won't see it. So you're going up and over like you did when you just put the zigzag sort of pattern on top of the wreath, copper wreath base. I would recommend using all of it. We have put a lot in the kits because it creates a really nice sort of chunky base and it really kind of makes a more abundant looking wreath when you have a sort of quite a full wreath base. So up and over. And this is the sort of the area of your wreath that you can water. Once it's up on your door, you can simply trickle some water sort of down behind the wreath just to keep it nice and fresh. That's if you want to. I personally am too lazy for that. I don't tend to do that, and my wreaths still stay nice and beautiful until well into the new year. And I usually leave mine on the door until I have my spring wreath up. So that just shows that you don't necessarily need to water it. It depends on the weather. If we don't have much rain, then maybe give it a good sort of drink. But if not, don't worry too much about it. Okay, so I'm keeping my binding wire attached just as I'm finishing now. So I'm not going to take that off. Okay, and then I'm just going to leave that to one side because the next stage is to break down all of our sort of fresh foliage and buried elements. So I'm just going to pop that to the side. And I'm going to put my wired elements to the side as well so they don't get swept away. Okay, so we'll start with the spruce. So this is just sort of, you know, a Christmas tree spruce. It smells incredible, smells like Christmas, and it creates a really lovely texture, a really lovely tone of green. So you're going to be breaking this up into sections with your scissors or secateurs, and you're looking for sections like this. So sort of 5 inches long or so. If it's the section at the top, you can cut that in one piece. And you're just breaking that down. In theory, you're sort of taking the sections off the middle trunk of the spruce. You can take the little bits off as well if you want to. So then you're left with a kind of a trunk of the spruce, and that's what you then discard. So I'm just going to throw that down there. We're not going to use that in our wreath. We're just going to use the sort of aesthetically pleasing bits. And then you can take off the sort of smaller stems like that as well if you want to. So this is probably more of the time-consuming part of wreath making, is breaking everything down, putting it into your piles, ready to make the posies when we actually start creating our wreaths. Okay, so that's all of the spruce cut down. So I'm just going to put that to the side in a nice pile so that is ready for when we come to start creating our wreath. I'm now going to do the buried myrtle. Now this has had a real resurgence in sort of popularity over the past few years. In my opinion, it's a really lovely foliage. It dries beautifully. It's got these lovely kind of purple berries on. And again, similar to the spruce, we're just going to sort of cut it down into sort of sections, you know, 5-6 inches long. Take this bit off. Your foliages will be in sort of bundles, so you can remove the elastic before you break it down. It is easier when you do that. So yeah, just breaking it down into sections, using as much of it as possible. that's your buried myrtle, so I'll pop that in a pile, and then I'm going to swap that, the space of that, with the viburnum berries. So these are a similar tone to the myrtle. They're a sort of bluey purple, sort of almost iridescent kind of tone to them. They are stunning. You might find that the leaves look a bit dried. That is completely normal. You can just take those off if you want to, if they don't look too pretty. But these all look okay. I will include them. You know, like this one I might take off because it's been obviously eaten by something. But yeah, you can include the leaves even though they look a bit sort of dried. You know, the berry is the main event, that's why we're using it, but the leaves do add a different kind of texture, so why not include them? Okay. So again, just breaking it down into sections, because you sort of want to be able to include a little bit of the berry in most of the posies that go around your wreath, but that will become clear in a second. If you find, say for example here, we've got sort of quite a dense sort of stem, I would rather have a few out of this, or 2 out of this, so I'm going to cut it at the top to take one sort of area of berry off, and then I will then break that down. So then we've got 2 sort of sections out of that one. Okay, so that can go there. And now we'll break down the white wax flower. This is definitely one of my favourites. It dries beautifully. It smells like lemongrass when you cut it. So yeah, it's a really lovely sort of textured. I guess it is a floral, but it is more sort of foliage based in my opinion. So you're just going to cut it down into sections like this, and then you can use the sort of fronds that come below that don't necessarily have the floral on, just again because it adds a lovely texture to your wreath. So you're looking for sort of sections like this, and then you can cut down again as you go down the stem. So sections like that. And then hopefully you'll be able to smell that sort of lemongrassy scent. Beautiful. Okay, now we'll just cut down the white thistle. So the white thistle is just to add touches around the wreath. You'll probably get about 4 thistles for your wreath. So I'm just going to break it down into sort of sections like this. And then for the middle section, I would then take that off last. Like so. So there you have your little touches of white thistle. Okay, I'll pop that there at the front. Now moving on to the eucalyptus. Again, smells incredible. You know, adds a really lovely kind of sort of silvery grey tone to your wreath. So it mixes in really nicely with all the different tones of green and the berries and the ribbon. Okay, so we're just going to cut this down into little sections. Again, you know, sort of 5-6 inches, and then put that in a pile. Okay, so that's the eucalyptus. So I'll pop that to the side as well. And now we've got 3 more left, 3 more different foliages left. So this is the Ralphie. Again, a really lovely tone of foliage. It's sort of 2 tones, so the sort of under part of the leaf is more of a kind of grey, and the top of the leaf is a sort of sagey green. So it's a really beautiful sort of 2-tone foliage. So again, we're going to break that down into sort of 5-6 inch sections. So sections like that. Using all of the stem And if you're left with sort of a piece like this, I would still use that. I'd use that at the back of my posies when we're making the wreath. It's not particularly aesthetically pleasing at this point, but you won't be able to see it on the wreath, but it will add a bit of body, and we'll use it at the back. So keep all of those bits included. We're nearly ready to start making the wreath. This is definitely the more labour intensive part, but hopefully enjoyable and relaxing. Okay, so that's the Ralphie in a nice pile. We'll move on now to the buried ivy. Again, this is one of my favourites. You know, the berries are a two-tone in their sort of green with their kind of purpley brown. The leaves are like a nice deep green, again, lovely texture. So we'll break this down into sections. And again, you're looking sort of 5-6 inch sections of the berry, of the ivy berry. Hopefully, although this process does take time, it's quite therapeutic. The sort of repeating process is part of it I quite enjoy. So hopefully you've got some nice music on, Christmas music maybe, glass of something. We didn't need that bit anyway. Okay, now moving on, lastly to the pistache. Now, pistache is in the kits because, well, for two reasons, I guess. I personally really love the tone of this green. I think it adds a really nice sort of muted, kind of flat tone of green. You know, it's not glossy, but also it is a really good filler foliage that adds sort of quite a lot of body to your wreath. So quite a lot of sort of density comes from the pistache. It isn't necessarily a foliage that you want at the front of your posies, which I'll go through in a second, but it definitely adds sort of a nice sort of full texture, so it's a really good foliage in my opinion. So we're going to break this down into sections. Again, you're looking at sort of 6-inch sections, just like that. And again, this is probably most likely to go at the back of your, what's the matter with that? At the back of your sort of posies that go on your wreath, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't matter if you've got sort of some sort of wispy bits, you won't notice, but it will provide that density that we're after. Okay, we're getting there. So you're just looking for sections like that. Okay, so now all of your foliages are broken down into little sections in front of you, hopefully. We can now start building our posies that are going to form our wreaths. Okay, so your binding wire is still attached to your wreath ring. Now, the way, or my biggest or best tip to create a sort of professional looking wreath is to go in the same motion no matter which way you go. And this will all make sense in a second. For example, I work in a clockwise motion. So each posy that I put down on my wreath is pointing clockwise. So it flows and it has sort of a structure to it and a flow to it. And that is how you create a beautiful sort of professional looking wreath. Would be my biggest tip. So I'm going to show you how to do that. It doesn't matter if you go clockwise or anti-clockwise. It's obviously just something, you know, to do with the brain, how the brain works. But I'll show you how to do it. And if you just follow this step by step, you will create a beautiful wreath. So I start with my binding wire attached to my wreath at 9 o'clock. So if you imagine you have your wreath ring is a clock, you've got 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock. My binding wire is attached to my wreath ring at 9 o'clock. And I'm just going to let it sit in the middle and forget about it for a second while I create my first posy. So to create a posy, you want to take a little bit of everything or some of the piles, and then that's what creates your wreath. So I'll take you through that now. So I'm going to take some of the spruce, I'm going to take some of the berried myrtle, I'm going to take some of the waxflower, I'm going to take some of the ralphie, some of the berried ivy, and some of the pistache, which I will actually put at the front because I do quite like it, but I'm going to take 2 pieces of the pistache because, as I said, that's what forms sort of the body of our wreath, and then I'm going to put another piece behind it. I'm also going to take a little bit of the berried viburnum, so that will go at the front because that's sort of my favourite bit. So that goes at the front, and then I think I'm going to add a little bit more spruce at the side to create a sort of posy of foliage. I'm then going to lay that on my wreath at the 9 o'clock spot on my clock. I'm going to point it slightly to 11 o'clock. So if you imagine this section on your wreath ring is 9 o'clock, that's 12 o'clock, that is 11 o'clock. So I'm just placing it on top of the moss, just slightly pointing out, very slightly. And then going to hold it really tight. You can be as assertive as you want, nothing's going to break. And then with my binding wire, I'm going to go up and over tightly, back underneath, and again up and over and back underneath. And then I might go around a third time, up and over and underneath. And now this is another crucial step. I'm then going to twist my wreath slightly, so I have a new 9 o'clock. I have a new point on my wreath that is at 9 o'clock, and then I'm going to make another posy. So I'll take some spruce. This time I'm going to put some eucalyptus in there. I'm going to put some berried myrtle, I'm going to save my wax flower for the front, so I'm going to put that there and put that on the top. I'm going to put some Ralphie in there, a couple of bits of Ralphie, some of the beautiful buried ivy, and a couple of pieces of pistache. I'm going to put these both at the back to create that body, and then I'm going to put the white wax flower on top, because that to me is my showstopper. That's the bit that I want to see. So you have your little posy like so. So I'm then going to take this posy and I'm going to lay it on top of the wires that have bounded the previous posy. So it's just going to go like that. I'm then going to wrap it up and over with my binding wire, nice and tight, and then I'm going to twist. I'm just going to move this foliage in front just so that you can see it a bit better. Okay, so now we're going to twist our wreath. So we've put that on top of the previous binding wire, twist our wreath so we have a new section of binding wire that we're going to put our new posy on top of. Okay, so creating another posy with the spruce and with the buried myrtle. Some Ralphie, the ivy, and the pistache. I'm going to put some at the front, some at the back, and then I'm going to add in some wax flower on top, and I'm also going to put in a sprig of my blue viburnum berries on top. And then I'm going to place that down on top of the binding wire that has bounded the previous posy onto the wreath. So just laying that on top at a slight angle out, sort of tilting out of your wreath, and then I'm going to bind that with my binding wire 3 times. Okay, I then let my wreath sit flat and then I twist it. So I've got my new area here for my next posy. Okay, so some spruce. I'm going to go with some eucalyptus. And then the buried myrtle. And then I'm going to pop on a thistle at the front, because again, that's my showstopper. That's the bit that I want to see. Add some Ralphie. Buried ivy, and then pistache at the back, and then I'm going to add in my white thistle on the top. So that is my showstopper. So that's going to be laid over the top of the binding wire of the previous posy, holding it nice and tight, and then binding it round up and over 3 times onto your wreath. Lay it down flat and twist. And as you can see, hopefully now it's making sense that I work in a clockwise motion. You might find that you feel more natural working in an anti-clockwise, but what I mean by that is that everything is facing the same way. So everything is going the same direction around your wreath. Okay, next posy. And on this one, my showstopper at the front is going to be, I'm going to add in a little bit of the blue viburnum. Okay, so, and some eucalyptus as well, actually. I'm going to put that on top too. Okay, so I'm placing my new posy on top of the binding wire of the previous posy, facing the same direction, holding it nice and tight and binding, and making sure that each posy is put on top of your moss. So let me show you how it looks at the moment, so give you an idea. So as you can see, it's all facing in the same direction, so going in the same motion. All of the posies are sat on top of the moss, so you can't really see it. Okay, so next posy, you're probably, I would say, looking like you'll probably make about 11 posies. Okay, so I've got the spruce, I'm adding in the buried myrtle, put some pistache there and at the back. And then the buried ivy, a couple of bits of that. And then I'm going to put some wax flower, the white wax flower in, to add that sort of slight touch of white. And then just deciding whether to add in some blueberries or not. I think I will just put a touch in there at the front. And a piece of eucalyptus too. Okay, so now I have my posy ready. I'm going to lay it on top of the binding wire of the previous posy. And then I'm going to wrap or bind with my wire. Nice and tight. That's crucial. You know, you can be as assertive as you want to be. There's nothing worse than, you know, binding all your posies onto your wreath ring and then you've not done it tight enough and then they sort of fall out. I promise you nothing's going to break. It's all really sturdy foliages. And I'd hate for that to happen, so make sure you're binding really nice and tightly onto your wreath ring. Okay, so new posy. Taking some spruce. Some of the myrtle. The Ralphie, some of the buried ivy, and then the pistache. I'm going to put a couple of pieces of pistache at the bottom, at the back, sorry, and then I'm going to add in one of my, if I can find them, white thistles on top. So that's my showstopper. I'm going to pop a little bit of the white wax flower too. And then I'm going to lay that down on top of the previous posy's binding wire. And then I'm going to take that leaf off. It's a nice one. And then nice and tight, up and over, be assertive. And then lay that down and twist. We're getting there now, and then obviously once all these posies are on, we can start adding in the sort of wired section, the wired elements, sorry, that make it look really festive and Christmassy. I'm going to go with some Ralphie here. And some buried ivy. And then a little bit of pistache at the back. And then I'm going to pop in some blue viburnum berry and a little bit of wax flower. Okay, so that's going to sit on top of my previous posies binding wire, slight angle, slightly outside of the ring, but on top of the moss, and up and over with the binding wire. Lay it back down and then twist your wreath. Okay, I think we've probably got 3 posies left to do. If you want to, if you feel like it would make you a bit more confident in terms of what to use and when, you are more than, you know, welcome to do a sort of technique where you make your 11, maybe 12 posies at the beginning, as in you don't sort of make them, but you kind of think to yourself, okay, I need 12 posies worth of spruce. So you divvy up your spruce into 12 little piles, and then you do the same with the other elements, just so that then you'll feel confident that you have enough foliage for each posy. But if you kind of follow the amount I've been using, you'll be absolutely fine. You'll probably have leftovers. We've been really kind of made sure that your kits are really abundantly packed, that you've got plenty of elements in here. We didn't want these wreath kits to be sort of, for want of a better word, like bog standard. We wanted them to feel luxurious and, you know, for you to open your boxes and just be kind of blown away by how many different elements you have in your kits. And I hope you feel that way. Hope you felt that way when you opened your wreath kit boxes. But yeah, so you probably will have leftovers. I'm fully expecting that I probably will have bits left over. So if you'll kind of go off the sort of gauge of how much I put in my posies and how big my posies look, you will definitely have plenty of foliages, so that you don't have to sort of do the whole pile of 12 or whatever at the beginning. But whichever way makes you feel more relaxed, more confident, more comfortable making your wreath. Okay, so I'm going to put one more blue viburnum there, a bit of eucalyptus, the front, and then I'll place that on top of my previous posies binding wires. Hold it nice and tight. Bind the stems 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Lay it back down and then twist. So yeah, I think we're going to go with probably 1.5. So one big posy, and then we'll probably need a little mini one to finish everything off. Okay, so some spruce. 2 thistles there to use. Some waxflower, berried myrtle, eucalyptus, the Ralphie, I would also suggest, if you do feel like, oh, you've got lots left over, I wouldn't be tempted to make the last few posies humongous to use everything, because that will unbalance, if that's the word, your wreath. So I would try and keep your posies the same sort of size as your previous ones, and then, you know, make a little sort of tablescape with the foliages. Pop some in bud vases or little vases that you might have, you know, just around the home. So use it that way. But yeah, I wouldn't be tempted to make your last few posies ginormous. Okay, so that's the penultimate posy, binding that 3 times, being really nice and tight and assertive with it, and then I'm going to twist. Okay, so now this is probably, I'd say, out of the entire wreath making, probably the trickiest bit. So this is the bit that you might find a little bit tricky. So you're going to make a little posy. It's not going to be huge because it's unlikely you'll have a big enough gap to make a big posy for the end. So I'm going to make a little bit of spruce, just using up some of the leftovers that you have on your bench. But what we might need to do is we're likely to need to trim the stems at the end when we've made the posy. You can use, although I wouldn't suggest making, as I've just said, making anything too big in size in comparison to the rest of your wreath. I would maybe use this posy as an opportunity to use all your kind of favourite bits, whether that's the berried ivy, which I'm definitely more drawn to, or the viburnum berries, or the white waxflower. So, you know, give it your best. Put all the bits you love the most in at the front. Okay, so I've just made a sort of smaller posy. I'm now going to trim the stems. Being obviously careful of your fingers. And it just makes it easier to do the technique to finish off your wreath. Okay, so I'm going to take this in my hand nice and tight. Okay, nothing's going to get messed up. It's all pretty robust. And I'm going to lift the first posy that I put down on my wreath up, and I'm going to tuck the last posy underneath and behind it. I'm then going to make sure I don't sort of bind any foliages down. I'm then going to bind really assertively, like really tight, around like sort of 3 times. And don't take the wire off at this point either. And then that finishes your wreath. So you'll see there that you can't really tell where the sort of join, for want of a better word, is. Okay. I'm now going to take my binding wire over to the sort of the outside of my wreath, through the gap, and then I'm going to sort of bring a length of it up, and I'm going to cut it. And now with that length of wire, your binding wire, to sort of secure it, you can sort of, it's a bit, I would liken it to sort of sewing. You're sort of casting off at the end. I'm just going to wrap it round the copper wreath ring, and just do that a few times. So just wrapping it round. Easier said than done. There we go. It's just a sort of cast off, just to make sure that nothing's going to come undone. Okay, and then you can then fold that piece of wire back into the wreath if you wanted. Okie doke. So now we can start adding in all of our lovely sort of Christmassy elements to our wreath. Now, I personally tend to start, trim that bit, start with the sort of cones and those kind of sort of textural elements. So they will already be wired for you. So I'm going to start with the larger cones. And when I place them on my wreath, I'm just going to thread the wire through, and if it reaches the back of the wreath, I'll then bend it back on itself and push it back into the wreath, just to sort of protect your door or whatever surface you're placing your wreath on. And then importantly, I'm going to face the cone in the same motion as the rest of the wreath is. So I've gone in a clockwise motion, so my sort of tip of my cone is going to face clockwise. So I'm not going to pop it sort of straight up to the ceiling. I'm going to sort of angle it in a clockwise motion. And I'm also going to work in a sort of motion of 3 in a triangle. So I'm going to put 1 cone here, 1 cone here, and 1 cone there. So if the cone goes in, I can feel it slightly coming out the back. So I'm just going to bend that back on itself so that the wire isn't sticking out the back. And then my other one's going to go up here. So pushing that through, I can feel the wire. I'm just going to bend that back and push it back into the wreath and angle it in my nice clockwise motion. And then the third one, push that through and bend the wire back on itself. And then we've got 3 of sort of slightly smaller, more kind of alder cones. Again, they're just going to go straight in. These wires are slightly shorter, so you might not find they come out the other side, so that's fine. And then we've got 5 of these sort of little lime slice clusters. Again, I'm just going to dot those around my wreath. You can evenly space them, or if you want to cluster them, you can and group them together, but I'm just going to evenly place them throughout my wreath and then bend that wire back into the wreath. bottom of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was my final one. Okay, and then lastly, well, the last two things, we're going to work out where our top is. So when you hang your wreath, where you want the top to be. I think mine is here, just looking at it. So I'm going to put my string, my twine, where there's a gap between two posies. I mean, it's not that important, but that would be the easiest place to sort of put your twine. And I just feed that through. I will then tie a knot near the moss base, and then I will then tie another knot at the top. So that creates my sort of twine hanging mechanic. And then I'll need to decide if I want to put my ribbon at the top or bottom, but I'm going to show you how to tie your ribbon first. So you will have your ribbon, and you should, and I've done it, I knew I would do this, should have, here, a piece of wire as well. So this is what we use to attach our ribbon to the wreath. Now, you can tie your bow any way you want to. You can have it as just the trails, the sort of tails coming down, or you can hang it with your ribbon if you want to. But I like to tie it into a bow. Now, the way I do it isn't particularly technical. There's no sort of specific way. I simply do tie a bow, but I do maybe do something that's a little bit more technical in that I will twist. So I will twist my ribbon so that the velvet goes over. I will then twist it again and then feed that through. There we go. Okay, with that. But yeah, I don't think you need to worry about having a perfect bow. I think with the sort of style of these wreaths, they are rustic, they are natural, they are organic looking. You know, just tie your bow in a way that you like, and it will look beautiful. Okay. And you can also manipulate it a bit more once it's on. Okay, so then to secure it, I will put a wire through the loop at the back. I will then bend it back on itself and then just twist it. It doesn't have to look pretty at all. You won't see it. And then where I've put the twine, I like my bows at the top generally. I'm then just going to push that wire through. And then bend that wire back on itself into the wreath. And then you can sort of titillate your ribbon and make it look pretty. It's much easier to do once it's on your wreath. Now, I do like to have the trails two different lengths. I don't like them to match. I cut mine at a slight sort of angle. I have one longer than the other. So it's just cut on a point. And there you have it. You can, if you want to, once your ribbon is on, you can, if you want to, move your cones around so that you can see them better, but you might find that they're in a good spot. And then you just sort of move everything around, check everything's where you want it to be, and that's it. So there you have it, your Woodland Christmas wreath. It will go on your door and it will survive well into the new year. They just tend to dry out beautifully. If you want to water the back, like I said at the beginning, the moss space at the back, you're more than welcome to. Just get a jug of water and just trickle it behind. And that's about it. So there you have it, your Woodland Christmas